What? You're good?
Yeah. All right, the live stream is started. And we are recording and we have quorum.
Good morning. Welcome to today's February 6th edition of the Clemency Review Commission. Time is 9:07 a.m. and I will call the meeting to order. We'll start with roll call of officials. My name is Commissioner Zach Lindstrom. To Zoom.
Commissioner Crawford.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Commissioner Burt. Commissioner Mesrick, are you checking in?
I think she's trying.
I think you're on mute.
Hold on.
There you are.
Okay. Oh, I was using headphones because I'm babysitting a barky Jackson. So,
Okay.
Rick.
And Commissioner Roller, we're just doing a roll call of officials. So if you can introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, Artika Roller.
And Carly Stark, Executive Director.
Item B on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved, Ms. Rick.
Second
Is there a
Moriarty.
All right. All those, do we got a roll call this?
Yep.
Would you like to call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Burt.
Aye.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yes.
Commissioner Crawford.
Yes.
Commissioner Mesrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Roller.
Yes.
Item C on the agenda is approval of the minutes from January 9th, 2026. We did get these we haven't had these very long, but if there is a motion to approve the minutes, I will take that.
So moved Moriarty.
Is there a second?
Second, Crawford.
Executive Director Stark, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Roller.
Yes.
Commissioner Mesrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Crawford.
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yes.
Commissioner Burt.
Yes.
Commissioner Lindstrom.
Aye. I believe that's 6-0.
Yes.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the monitoring report review. We have 2.4 financial planning and budget, and item B is communication and support to the commission and board. Do we all know where to find these? Looks like I have 2.8 in front of me, and that's going to cover from September 10th, 2025 to January 22nd, 2026. And let's see if I can find 2.4. Is that in here?
Yeah.
2.4 covers September 10th, 2025 to January 22nd, 2026 as well.
I sent those also to everyone via email, so they're at the top of your inbox.
So with 2.4, which is executive limitations, monitoring report, financial planning and budgeting. The executive limitations policy is written prohibitive, don't be specific, bad stuff language. Because compliance with 2.8 is mostly subjective, do we think we got what we needed? We are going to incorporate more of that type of group discussion than may appear in measurement indicators. Carly included her first attempt at this report. 2.4, the budgeting review. I ask that you view this as a whole policy, read global prohibition out loud, and give members time to. The report assessment is a one pager. And then Carly, if you want to leave that up on the screen, you can.
Yep. So everyone, you should be able to see the report assessment questions. As you remember from last time, we talk about whether we believe the interpretation of the policy is reasonable. And then after that is the data in support of the interpretation, and have I clearly stated whether the organization is in compliance, or if non-compliance, have I reported how I'm going to correct or bring us into compliance.
So we'll start by assessing lower level policies before assessing the global policy material. And then what that is we're going to be focusing on the reasonableness of the interpretation. And then am I supposed to read all these?
Those are just reminders.
Okay.
We looked at those last time to help people think about what's meant by a reasonable interpretation, what's meant by data supporting the interpretation. And I'm perfectly happy and ready to be helpful in any way.
Sure.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. All right. So I'm gonna be a shadow chair here and help you all through the process as you're learning how to assess monitoring reports. So as Zach said, the first report that you're going to assess is 2.4 financial planning and budgeting. He referenced what time period you're monitoring and when the report was due and when the report was received at the top of your actual monitoring report. Usually we start by just taking a look at the policy as a whole to get it into your heads. We don't have that immediately available on the screen, so I'm going to just start you off by looking or reading out loud the global constraint for this limitation policy. And then we'll start at a lower level, 2.4.1. and go through the process of assessing the reasonableness of the interpretation and the measurement indicators, talking those through, and then talking about the data that's been submitted to demonstrate compliance. This is a fairly short monitoring report, but it's the first time you've looked at financial planning and budgeting with a draft budget attached. So I think there'll be room for conversation in there as well. So with that in mind, 2.4 financial planning and budgeting, the global constraint is the executive director shall not cause or allow financial planning for any fiscal year or the remaining part of any fiscal year to deviate materially from the board's ends, policies, or statewide financial policies. Now, you've got on the screen those questions that we're using as prompts just in the quiet of your own brain as you're doing your assessment. You probably looked at those when you did your preparation for this meeting. So with those in mind, 2.4.1, that's a provision within this policy, reads, the executive director shall not create a budget that risks incurring the situations or conditions described as unacceptable in the financial condition and activities policy. So you would have been referencing that policy as you were thinking about this assessment. So I'll give you just a moment of quiet to kind of recapture your thoughts on the operational interpretation that Carly has included along with the measurement indicators. And then we'll open up the floor to clarifying questions of Carly and then discussion about whether you believe this to be a reasonable interpretation. So let's just take a moment of quiet for you to gather your thoughts. All right, Zach, if we can play tag team on the discussion part, that'd be great, because I don't want to overstep my bounds here.
Sure.
But I will go ahead and open this up for conversation now. Does anybody have any clarifying questions for the operational interpretation or measurement plan that they'd like to ask of Carly? Hearing no clarifying questions and being mindful of those prompts on the slide on the screen, I'll open up the floor with Zach's help for any discussion that you might have about your assessment as to the reasonableness of this interpretation and measurement plan.
I see Commissioner Moriarty has her hand up.
Go ahead.
I do, and I think I just have a broader question, and I'm not trying to open a can of worms, I promise. And I don't know if others feel this way, but you know, I feel like I am somewhat and you know, very happy. I understand the structure and the oversight process. I'm just concerned that in my kind of quick deep dive into, or not even that deep a dive into these assessments, I'm not sure we've helped Carly up front at all with any of it, or been involved in that piece. So it feels to me sometimes like, and I'm not sure there's a better way to do it, but it feels to me sometimes like, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a question for Carly. I mean, do we have a role to play in supporting the formulation? Or do you feel like the process of formulating and having us sort of look over? I mean, and I have great confidence in Carly and the team. And everything I'm seeing is not only reasonable, but incredibly thoughtful and nuanced, and none of that surprises me. And I bet I'm speaking for the other commissioners. But I'm not sure I'm being as useful as I could be. And again, like with a financial assessment, I don't have any inherent usefulness. I'll just say it's not my expertise. But I guess my question about the process, and I don't know if any of the other commissioners feel this way. I feel like the team is doing this extraordinary work, and we're in a position to then provide oversight in this forum, but we're not doing any of the actual work. And maybe that's just how this divides, or maybe there's, you know, but that's just an open question for me. Does anybody else sort of feel this way? Maybe just not as equipped to be useful.
I totally agree.
Okay. Who
I
said
can
that?
speak to the, I can speak
Astrid.
to this from my experience on the municipal side.
Yeah.
It typically, like, staff is the one that prepares the budget. They
Yeah,
put the
definitely.
line items in front of you, and then you get dropped into it and you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's kind of what some of us are feeling here. But this is totally normal, a normal way to present information and budgetary items from, you know,
It
a
feels
government
very, yeah,
entity.
it's what I'm used to. But I also just feel like because, you know, we're still in the beginning phases and staff is just doing an extraordinary amount of work right now. I'm not suggesting that, you know, we have more of a role to play, but I don't know, like, how does this sequencing feel to you, Carly? Is this okay to ask?
Yeah, I think this is exactly the purpose of these discussions and having them in these meetings.
Yeah.
I think the budget and financial part of the monitoring has been hard for me to wrap my head around, even when we were drafting policies and then having everyone review, because there are so many statutes and policies at
Yeah.
the state level
Yeah.
that define what can happen.
Mhm.
So I don't know how much more work on the front end the commission could help with, but I do think it's really important that you all are aware of what's going on.
Absolutely.
For instance, when I talk about fiscal year 28 of if we don't get any additional money here where we need to cut, I do think eventually there may be a place for advocacy to
Yeah.
both the Board of Pardons members and the legislature on that. I hear what you're saying though about how it feels a little bit disjointed because it's like all the work happens and then it's just, here's a report. And I think that'll feel different over time. Because even as I'm writing these monitoring reports, it's like, this is how I interpret it. I wonder how the commission will read it. And then
Yep.
I'm looking forward to these conversations to figure out how this works long-term, which is why I'm happy we're doing it in the meetings.
So I guess the only thing I would say is if you, Carly, feel as you're going through all this, because we're still, like, the commission's new, if there are ways that Zach could lend his expert, no, I'm kidding. I mean, if there are ways that,
Happy to do it.
yeah, that we could, I just don't want you to feel like we're dropping in once a month, and not fully ingrained in your thought process and giving comments that may be less informed than you want them to be. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't feel that way. I mean,
Okay, good.
I think inherently because we are just starting, it may feel that way, but I think this is the trial and error part of
Okay.
this where
Yep.
we're trying to get our footing and how it works.
All right. Well, know that we're here for you, and now we'll stop talking.
Yeah. And when we get to the data, I did one of my staff pointed out an addition error that I will talk about when we talk about data.
So this is Stacy, and I'm not aware if there are observers or not, but I should clarify my role because I think today I'm going to have a couple different hats on. Shadow chair as Zach and everybody is learning how to work through these assessments. And for a moment here, I'd like to slip that hat off and put my governance coaching hat on to answer or to maybe illuminate some of the things that you've been talking about here in the last couple minutes. Random item number 1, trusting Carly is great, but governing boards need to trust and verify what's going on. Thought number 2, random thought. All of these policies, when you're assessing them for the first time out of the gate, it feels discombobulated because you've never seen a report before. Every time you go through this, and in this case, it's an annual report, you'll understand a little bit more about how the process works. So lean into that awareness and cut yourself some grace here. So that's another thought. Next thought. Providing a helpfulness role is noble and kind, but the primary role of a governing board is oversight. And so be cautious about wanting to or offering to reach in and be helpful in any way to Carly and the staff. It's a slippery slope when you have to turn around then and assess their performance if you've been involved in that. And I know that's a delicate thing, and you'll have to find your right spot as a team together, but take great care about reaching in and trying to demonstrate some helpfulness tendencies. And then with this policy in particular, Carly's exactly right. There are so many statutes that guide what she can and cannot do when creating budgets. But at this point in time in Minnesota, we just need to be so very vigilant about everything connected with, well, dollars and everything else. So taking care to make sure that your governing board, your policies are correct, making sure those provisions are really monitoring and providing you as a governing board with information that you need is critical. I'm not convinced that they're the right ones for you. There may be other questions that you want to turn into provisions and do some rewriting later on. I know Carly struggled with this precisely because of what she was talking about before. So as we're working through this assessment process today with this report, constantly be asking yourself, are these the right provisions? Should there be other provisions that will give us more important information or guide Carly in a more specific way? Because that's how you govern an organization, guiding through these policies. And that's it. That's
Really helpful, Stacy.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm here today. So I'm going to set my governance hat aside now and put my my pretend chair hat on and bring you back through to where we were in this policy. And hang on a second, I got a weird cursor thing happening here. So you can look at, and again, now engage in a conversation with 2.4.1 titled risk. Is that operational interpretation and the measurement indicators that Carly's presented to you reasonable? So opening up for conversation.
To me, this one seems pretty straightforward because it's a dollars and cents report. I think that she's indicated where we're sitting currently financially. She's indicated what we have as a carryover balance. And she's also indicated what's going to need to be cut if we can't secure any additional funding in the next biennium. To me, this looks like a pretty sound budget.
For 241, all we're looking at right now, not the budget itself, the budget draft, but just the operational interpretation and her measurement plan. Are those then reasonable to you? Because we'll look at the budget separately.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to me.
Okay. Others, thoughts about the reasonableness of the operational interpretation and the measurement plan for 241?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I think it's sound and it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And so when we're talking about that,
Yeah.
though, we're talking about, I interpret this to mean the budget created by the director must be, what is that word?
Must create a balanced budget that does
Well,
not
it's
exceed.
if
Is that where you are?
effectuate the goals of the commission and board within the appropriation set by legislation. And then the measurement is compliance for personal period being demonstrated when. This would be September of 10th of 25 to January 22nd of 26. The organization provides a balanced budget with a breakdown and explanation of costs that show how the budget will meet the goals of the governing body.
Yep. So as you're looking at the left side of the screen where those report assessment questions are, is there anything on that list that stands out to you as, maybe this wasn't quite right? And I'm not leading you anywhere. I just want to make sure you're looking at those questions and getting them ingrained in your consciousness as you're looking at any monitoring report.
So again, hi, this is Carl. I have
Mhm.
I challenged that question. I think number 3, did it make sense for the organization in its context, even if it wasn't how you would interpret it? To me, that feels like a sticky wicket.
Right. And so think about that, everyone. You know this from training. You've already set aside in some of your other policies, particularly the quadrant about delegating authority to Carly, that you've literally delegated authority to her to make organizational decisions. In order for her to have authority over that playing field, remember the playing field?
Mhm.
You have to allow her to be the one that's providing the operational interpretation. She's on the playing field. She knows the organization better than you ever will because she
Mhm.
swims in it every day. So if you don't say to her, we're going to assume that you're going to make reasonable interpretations of our policies, we'll be the arbiters of reasonableness. And so even if she submits a monitoring report, operational interpretation that's reasonable and you just don't love it so much, you don't get to say to Carly, you have to change that because it doesn't match what, I don't know, Carl's definition of a good interpretation would be.
However, you could say, I don't know if I think that's reasonable. Here is how I would do it, and then have a
And then
discussion on that.
conversation. But there can't be hooks attached to it, right? Now, if the whole board says, gosh, that's reasonable, and we still don't like the direction that's sending the organization, then your recourse board is to adjust your policy language and force Carly into a different direction. Does that make sense? That's how you guide the organization. Your guidance comes through the words of these policies, the words of this framework. Okay? Does that help answer the question?
It does. And then for me, it raises a second question, and that
Mhm.
is, if we interpret it different, will we need a majority of the board to change direction, or is that
Mhm.
something hidden more in a different section?
No. So the last question that I'll be asking for you, if I'm still being the shadow chair here this morning, is, so given this whole discussion, with your heads thoroughly in the game of everything financial planning and budgeting, are there some policy changes that you want to make? Let's look at those now. If we need to establish a thinking team to go away and do more thinking or crafting the language, great. If it's an easy fix, bam, we can do it right now.
Mhm.
But we don't wait for, I don't know, one time a year when we sit down and look at all of the policies and try to remember what the heck we were talking about way back in February. We do it built into the process.
Okay. Because as you said, Carly is the one swimming it, and that's why I think Perry was feeling, and I don't want to speak for you, Perry, that we kind of drop in, helicopter in and go, oh, wait a minute.
Yep, that's
Right.
exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And I'll
Yep.
pause there.
Yep.
I think that's part of transparent government, though, is asking the questions.
Very much.
And I
so.
know it does feel uncomfortable, but the questions need to be asked, even if it doesn't change the outcome, and there needs to be discussion so that it's clear that there's oversight over the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just the one other piece of it is I think we're sort of different than a traditional board in that way, in that we're here for, to play a substantive role in the org as well, in parallel. And I think that's, our role isn't exclusively governance, it's also creating substantive outcomes in the clemency space. So I think that's, we're putting on the other hat that I feel like we just have to be just decisive and thoughtful about. That's I think what I'm expressing is what I think all of our probably collective, like, right, this is our other role. And I'm not sure, it's something I wasn't as thoughtful about when we first began. And just seeing a lot more how we're evolving. And I think I appreciate all the comments.
Good. Excellent. All right. So I'm not one last chance here to say, does any board member have a concern about the reasonableness as defined on those pointers on the left side of your screen of the operational interpretation and the measurement plan for 241?
No concerns.
Okay. Well, then let's go on and ask the next question. Looking at the supporting data or evidence, does anybody have any reason to believe that the information does not comply with the measurement indicator? Is the proof there? in other words.
And
Go
before
ahead.
we start that conversation, I'll just notice that I did pick up a couple of errors in the narrative all the way at the bottom. There's something that says fiscal year 23-24. It should say 24-25. And then also in the budget summary, all the way at the bottom, the total available funds in fiscal year 26-27, something was added in twice. So that number should be 2,417,475. And if this is, regardless of whether this is adopted, I will make those changes and send a corrected copy.
All right, looking at the data, then on the next pages. Any concerns about the data provided?
No, one point of clarification. So supporting data, Carly, it should say instead of FY 26-27, what should it read?
Oh, apologies. It's not, it's in the data itself, the budget data.
Oh,
So the
okay.
spreadsheet towards the bottom, there's in part of the narrative, it says 23-24 biennium, and it should say 24-25.
Mhm.
Okay.
And again, the total funds available in fiscal year 26-27, which is the last line, should be approximately 2.4 million instead of 3.8.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next provision. Zach, how are you doing? Are you ready to take one on? Give it a try?
Sure.
Okay. Or let's see. What do we have for other policies, provisions? I'm looking at a couple different versions. Was that it?
I think that's it, actually.
That's it?
Yep, it's that, and then the
Global.
global.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to do the global? You want me to do it
Where would that be?
on the next page?
This?
Yeah, this is the global policy.
Oh, the global
And then
policy. The global policy, the executive director shall not cause or allow financial planning for any fiscal year or remaining part of any fiscal year to deviate materially from the board's ends policy of statewide financial policies. The interpretation of that is, I interpret this to mean that the budget created by the director must effectuate the goals of the commission and board within the appropriation set by the legislature.
So the first question you look at is the operational interpretation right below where the global policy is listed. You can see how Carly handled that and her measurement indicator. Does anybody have any clarifying questions on the operational interpretation or the measurement plan? It's pretty straight up, but you might have questions. Hearing none, let's move on to the supporting data. The evidence itself is the budget spreadsheet and addendum. Go ahead and turn your attention to that. As always, when I'm doing budgets, I'll ask in case there's any clarifying questions in the budget. Something might just need some clarification. So what you see here on the next color-coded pages, does anybody have any clarifying questions for Carly as you're absorbing the information on this draft budget?
I'm actually not sure I'm looking at the right. Is it possible to pull up that on the screen, Stacy, or is that?
Carly could. I don't have my hands on the keys, so hang tight
Only
here.
if it's easy.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right data.
Good morning, Commissioner Bad Hartbull.
I will also note for the record that Commissioner Harrington joined and his camera is off, so he's not spotlit, but he is here.
Good morning, Commissioner Harrington. Morning.
And Carly, I see two hands up. I don't know who was here first while you're pulling up the monitoring reports.
I yield to Commissioner Burt.
Okay. Commissioner Burt, what do you have for us?
Looking at the budget and I guess mine are just general questions. I see that for 26 we have office relocation one-time cost, and then in 27 we have aid grants to non-government boards, and then 28 it seems like the total non-payroll numbers drop quite a bit, or is that 28? Now, is that part of the potential cuts? And this is just a question for Carly, and I don't know if this is part of what the commission roles are, but is this part of kind of future planning or advocacy that we need to be doing?
So that's a good question. And so that is a projection of what it would look like if our budget stays exactly the same. So I was showing where, in order to keep the staff level we are at now, what things would need to be cut should we not receive an increase. So part of the reason that we are able to spend extra money this year is because of that carryover, which is a bill that it says you can carry over from fiscal year 24, 25 to 26, 27. And I think it also allows carryover to one more biennium. That is an unusual thing. So I'm planning as if we carried it over this biennium, or we can use it in this biennium, but I'm planning as if we can't in the next biennium. And just trying to project where we would be. Because my priority as the director is to keep the staff, because I think that is the most important asset to getting the work done and those goals. And I wouldn't want to get rid of the outreach grants, but that is one of the areas where it would need to come from.
Okay, and so that's what I was trying to get at is I know earlier it had been mentioned about assisting Carly sort of in trying to do this. And I guess one of my question is this part of what we should be doing to sort of advocate to make sure that Carly doesn't get into that budget crunch in that way? Is that part of our role?
Go ahead, Stacy.
Okay, I'm taking my
Stacey,
shadow.
this is sort of for you.
Yep. So I'm taking my shadow chair hat off and putting my consultant hat on. If any governing board wants to hold back certain responsibilities that they would normally delegate away to staff for themselves, like some aspect of advocacy, that's fine. That's great. What we need to do to protect that then is get clear on exactly what that means and put it in the policy in your governance process quadrant that says, here are our jobs. Right now you have 3 on that policies, linking proactively with those that you represent. We call it or ownership linkage, crafting policies, and monitoring for compliance. So you'd add a 4th one, something about advocacy, and just be very clear about what it means. And then figure out how you are actually going to get it done, because you're putting on a different hat than as a governing board. You're putting on some sort of, I'll just call it worker bee hat, taking an administrative function for yourself or some sort of function that's not necessarily governance as we've defined it. So perfectly fine, just make it legitimate, make it clear, and figure out how you're actually going to get that work done so you can hold yourselves accountable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Is that something you're interested in pursuing, Commissioner Burt? I see there being significant logistical challenges with that, because considering we're not on the inside of
Right.
of asking for funding. I think Carly's a lot closer to that than we are, and it's pretty reasonable for the chief staff member to make a budgetary ask. And I would imagine that if Carly felt that she needed additional assistance in advocacy, that she would ask us.
No, understood.
Yes.
I just is something that I think, as far as
Mhm.
because we are thinking into the next biennium, it's something that even if it's soft advocacy, it's something that I think we should um, at least talk about and understand where Carly, if her priority is keeping staff, or at least keeping staff at levels that it's at now, if there's any potentiality of her losing staff or losing funding to keep that staff, that's something that I think we should all be mindful of, and utilize our voice to at least, like I said, soft advocacy at least.
Yeah, and actually during the executive director updates today, I will talk a little bit about the legislative session and plans for this year.
Okay, and that's all I was getting at. Just noticing that in the budget line and realizing, like, okay, there's a bit of a gap there. Why? And what does that really mean in kind of positions, people, or place?
Well, I guess another way to ask the question is do we feel that Carly's priorities are on point with what the mission of the board or commission is, if there is no additional funding? Or is what she's saying about wanting to retain staff and keep full staffing levels and the areas that she's identified as areas that could be cut if need be, do we feel that those are appropriate? And granted, because of the way our policy is crafted, this is what we've tasked her with doing. But I think the broader question becomes is the priority that she set forth align with what our policy is?
And this, because we're in this global policy, and I mean, this is the long-term projection. So fiscal year 28 is still a bit out, but I think you're right in that does that align with meeting the ends and the goals of the commission?
Right.
So if the commission's goals are more about outreach and application assistance than doing more applications, the
That has
commission
an
may
impact.
want to have a conversation about, is it better to keep those and reduce staff? And we're not at that point yet, but I think that is where the conversation would go next year, of if cuts need to be made, making sure that my budget aligns with the goals of the commission.
So this is Stacy as your governance coach. That's why in the budget draft that Carly submitted, really paying attention to the comments and assumptions column is important, and cross-referencing it, governing board, with your ends policies. One of the pointers I gave to Carly as I was doing my own review of this monitoring report is flagging out those line items in the draft budget that are clearly directly linked to ends. So the board, as they're assessing the budget draft, can see where those connections, that point is made. And yeah, it does. This is also a really great example, this discussion you've been having at a macro level, because you're starting, I hope, to see how all of these quadrants of policies interact. As you're looking at the budget, and your global policy says needs to be supporting our ends. Don't submit a budget that doesn't support the achievement of ends. As you're thinking about what what is our role as a governing board, and might we need to expand it to include more advocacy work? Gosh, what does that mean for our policy that spells out what are responsible for? All of this is designed to work together as a whole. And the more you get that concept of wholeness in your heads, the better you'll be at governing and assessing these reports, whether it's treatment or budgeting, planning, or communication and support to the board.
Mhm.
So where we left off, if I might pivot back to the question at hand, is assessing the global compliance. So did this policy as a whole, the global policy, and the monitoring that Carly has suggested through the evidence of the draft budget, demonstrate compliance with your policy? Are you good with the draft budget being a representation of complying with the policies?
This is Commissioner Bad Harple. I have a quick question. Under the comments and assumptions, that first block, the other employee costs are per diems paid to, is that cut off or is it a formatting?
I wondered about that.
It is cut off. I
Okay.
was having issues with the formatting of the spreadsheet and converting it to PDF. That line item is the per diems paid to commissioners. I
Okay.
don't know what it's just an estimate still, because the first year, not everybody claimed per diems, and we've been increasing that. So this is my rough estimate for how much those per diems will be.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I thought there might have been one other place where it got cut off, but now I can't find it. So
Oh, there is.
is
Let me
there?
see if I can find it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's related to the lease. And my apologies.
Yes.
Again, I printed it to PDF once and then I fixed it and then I missed a
Yeah.
couple. So
Yeah.
that was talking about the lease. We are unexpectedly having to leave the MPCA building. Currently, we lease 500 square feet and portions of some of their shared space, but because of the return to office, they don't have enough space for their own employees. So our lease will be ending this summer. So we are having to get new space. We can't actually fit all of our staff into 500 square feet. The previous arrangement worked really well because of the shared space. So we are working on getting that, which is why the lease, currently we pay about 25,000, but it's going to double. And that's why you also see a somewhat larger number in relocation costs, because currently we lease all of our furniture. So we have to pay for build out of the space and buy new furniture. But we're also working with the Cannabis Expungement Board on cost sharing so that we can reduce those costs.
Are there any final questions or concerns with the data that's been provided for this monitoring report? Hearing none, Zach, I'll turn it back over to you to entertain a motion. You've got some
I did have my
examples.
hand up, sorry. Just
Oh,
a
I'm
quick-
sorry.
That's okay,
It's
no worries.
really
Just-
small up here, so thank you for
Yeah,
just
yeah, no
speaking up.
worries.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question.
Yeah,
Carly,
yeah.
so you and I have touched base on this before. So how am I going to say this delicately? So our per diems, when we take per diems, so does your budget put a separate amount of money aside for our per diems, or by seeking per diems, are we, I mean, again, I'm not suggesting, I mean, I know that's part of the position 100%, but in terms of financial flexibility, does it affect the bottom line always?
I mean, I do set aside funds for that per
Yeah.
diem, but it's not a large amount compared to the rest of the budget and the other
Okay.
costs. And
Okay.
again, the fiscal note when the agency was started anticipated about I think $47,000 or $49,000, and it hasn't been that much.
It hasn't, okay. Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think of cost savings. Ways to, okay. Thanks.
So if there's a motion for this monitoring report, it could be a motion to accept the monitoring report for executive limitations monitoring report 2.4 financial planning and budgeting as a reasonable interpretation of our policy and the data that demonstrates compliance. Another alternative motion could to accept the report for same thing, 2.4 as a reasonable interpretation of our policy with the following minor concerns, if we have any. The data provided demonstrates compliance. The existing material commission does not require a new report to be submitted before it's next scheduled to be reviewed. Another alternative would be a motion to accept this report 2.4 as out of compliance as submitted by the executive director. I would say that because Carly has identified 2 corrections, that the second motion might be the most appropriate.
You might want to clarify which corrections you're talking about.
She made a
The-
correction to the biennium year and the dollar amount left over at the bottom of the budget. Which we're saying we would accept it with her corrections and not require a new report.
Mhm.
That, to me, that seems like the most reasonable motion. But if there's a different motion a commissioner wants to make, I'm here to accept it.
So this is Stacy as coach. You're on the right track.
Okay.
Anytime anybody submits a motion to be entertained by the rest of the board, when we're talking about monitoring reports, it needs to always have 2 pieces to it. It needs to say that the operational interpretation provided was reasonable or not reasonable for whatever reasons, and that the data provided demonstrated compliance with the interpretation or compliance with the measurement indicators. So you always need both pieces to a motion, okay?
So I can read it again and somebody could piggyback off this if they'd like. Is there a motion to accept this report, 2.4 financial planning and budgeting, as a reasonable interpretation of our policy with the following minor concerns? The 2 corrections that Carly identified with the biennium and the final budget amount. The data provided demonstrates compliance for the existing material. The commission does not require a new report to be submitted before it's next scheduled to be reviewed. Would somebody entertain that motion?
So moved, Mesrick.
Is there a second?
Crawford.
Second.
Executive Director Stark, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Burt,
Yes.
Commissioner Moriarty,
Yes.
Commissioner Crawford,
Yes.
Commissioner Messerich,
Yes.
Commissioner Roller,
Yes.
Commissioner Bad Hartbull,
Yes.
and do we still have Commissioner Harrington? Commissioner Lindstrom.
Yes, 7-0.
Do you want me to do communication and support? The next one?
Sure.
Yeah.
Huh?
I just don't, I never want to presume that I should just start rolling right into.
Oh, no, that's okay. Go ahead.
All right.
Learning
this-
as we go, Stacy.
we are
think
indeed. Okay.
Commissioner
so-
Harrington is back. I don't know if you heard the previous motion and wanted to weigh in on that.
I did not hear
Commissioner-
the motion. Sorry, my computer restarted on me.
Commissioner Roller, do you want to ask your question first? Okay, so the motion,
I can reread the motion.
well, the motion was basically to adopt the operational interpretation as
Accept.
reasonable,
Accept.
accept the operational interpretation as reasonable, and that the data demonstrates compliance with the caveat that the two corrections I talked about will be corrected. And so then the report does not need to be resubmitted, and we will schedule it for review next year.
The corrections that she made were to the correcting the year of the biennium and then correcting the budget carryover amount from 3 million to 2.4 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to weigh in, you can. You can also abstain if you missed part of the conversation.
I'm gonna abstain because I missed part of the conversation.
Okay.
All right, this is Stacy as coach before Stacy turns into shadow chairperson. Imagine how much quicker this process will go as you start gaining more traction. So if you thought that was a long process, just know that it's going to get quicker and quicker as you get more confident, okay? All right, so the next policy monitoring report up is 2.8, communication and support to the commission and board. This policy is monitored somewhat differently than what we just experienced. Why? Because if you really look at what's in this policy, all of the provisions, they're somewhat subjective in nature. It's the commission saying, did we get what we needed to govern well, largely, right? And so it's not fair to ask your executive director to provide you information or the data to prove that you thought you got what you needed. So we have to build in conversation time. And that's one of the strengths of this particular executive limitations policy. It's a chance for you once a year to sit down and say, how are we all doing together? Are we getting what we need to govern? Do we need to talk anything else through about the supports that we're getting or the information that we're getting? So it becomes more of a conversation with your executive director than a straight up assessment of this monitoring report, kind of like what we just marched through, where you're just asking clarification questions largely of your executive director. So Carly nailed that in one of the provisions in this policies where she set up a measurement indicator that said, well, you'll demonstrate compliance when the governing board talks and says, oh yeah, we got what we needed. But she needs to do more of those. And so I'm going to help you through this process so we can have conversation on each of these, but I'm going to hold you a little bit tighter to a time frame here. So I'm going to march us along a bit, even though I really want you to understand what it feels like when you have this conversation. So Zach already at the beginning of this referenced the time frame that this report is covering. You can see that at the top of your report in blue. The largest global constraint for this is that the executive director shall not cause or allow the commission or the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. In future meetings, I'll make sure that you see the whole policy with all of the provisions on the screen, minus all of the other stuff, because it really helps to get your head framed around the full nature of this policy. But for now, we're going to go right down to 2.8.1. That's the first provision in this policy. And I'll read the policy provision through, and then I'll give you a moment to collect your thoughts about the operational interpretation and measurement plan. This is one that I think can be straight up based on the data that Carly supports. So we'll march it through kind of like we did before. 2.8.1. The executive director shall not neglect to submit ongoing monitoring information or data required by the commission in a timely, accurate, and understandable fashion, directly addressing the provisions of the executive limitation or ends policy being monitored. Similarly, neglect to assist the commission in compiling annual summary monitoring information to share with the board. So that's the monitoring data provision. I'll take just a moment of quiet for you to reread the operational interpretation and the measurement plan. And then I'll be asking you while Carly pulls up that other one slide doc on the screen, whether or not you believe it to be reasonable. All right, open up to any clarifying questions, first and foremost of Carly. Any clarifying questions? Hearing none, what are your thoughts, commission members, about the reasonableness of this operational interpretation and the measurement plan? Use those bullets on the left-hand side of the screen to kind of jog your thinking. Did she cover all our bases, all of the relevant pieces of the policy? Was it plausible, prudent, understandable? Did it make sense in the context of the organization?
This is more of a clarifying question about reporting in general. The way that this is laid out, that we'll be providing the annual summary of information to the board at the second quarter meeting, which is supposed to be in June. Would that mean that we would have all the monitoring done by then?
In the future years, yes. This year, it will only start September 10th because that's when we adopted the policies. So it will be these two reports. We're going to have a meeting in June where we review some things, but I don't think that'll be enough time to get those reports incorporated into the annual summary. But then,
The go forward strategy would be that.
yes,
Okay. So essentially the timetable after this year would be that all our monitoring would be done by the second quarter report.
well, it's that all the monitoring for the whole year would be reported. The reason it's not all of them is just because we've only
Activation date.
started.
Yeah, no, I got
Yeah.
that. I'm just saying after this year, we will have done all the monitoring before the second quarter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we will be reporting from June of this year to June of next year. So it'll encompass the whole year of reports.
Well, assuming that would mean we'd all have to still be here too.
So let's open up the table then for conversation about the reasonableness of this interpretation as well as the measurement plan. To help you along, things that I look for when I'm breaking apart the actual policy language. Okay, so we specifically call out as a governing board timely. We called out specifically accurate. We called out specifically understandable fashion. So it helps in the operational interpretation if I see some sort of breadcrumb trail, whether it's a title for each of the paragraphs that address those specific pieces or something to make it as easy as possible for the assessor, all of you, to read through and make sure that the pieces are there, that everything is addressed. So that might be something that's a structural thing, but imagine what it would look like and how it's easier to absorb that information if it's structured in such a way with that kind of breadcrumb trail. Okay.
So in this scenario, Carly's defined timely is approximately 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yep. So she's got one, check, great.
She's also said if there's a delayed report, that it must be, she'll let us know before the due date and estimate a timeline.
Yep, check. That both seem reasonable, in my opinion.
And then she gives us the timeline of when this information will be presented to the board
Yep,
and what it's encompassing, which would be a full year's worth of data with the exception of this year
Yep.
because we haven't had a full year worth of policy adoption.
correct. So I'm not hearing any other comments about the reasonableness of the interpretation or the measurement indicators, the compliance plan.
Commissioner Crawford has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So one question I had, in the annual summary information will be provided to the Board of Pardons. It doesn't say to the Clemency Review Board. Should that be to the Clemency Review Board or just to the Board of Pardons?
So my interpretation is that annual summary is taking all of the ones that we've done at these meetings, so like this report, and creating a summary of what was discussed and providing that to the board. Because it is information that would have already been thoroughly discussed by the commission, my interpretation was that I would likely work with the chair to compile it and then provide a draft to the commission by email so that errors could be fixed, but that we wouldn't necessarily talk about it in a meeting.
Okay.
So in essence, you commission members are a governance labor-saving device of the board. They simply do not have the time to go through and do all of the assessments for all of these monitoring reports, ends and executive limitations. They've tasked that with you in separating out roles. So there's no need for you to see the summary report. I mean, I suppose you could share it with them, but.
Yes, I would want to share it. And I think that's towards the end.
Yep.
Because it's a compilation, feedback will be collected through email and can be approved by the chair as an accurate account of decisions made during open meetings.
Yep.
Okay, so all reference to the board is to the Board of Pardons, not to the Clemency Review.
Correct. There's that language discipline that's hard for some of us. Me.
Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So looking at the evidence, that's those next couple pages. Is the evidence provided for both of those compliance indicators? She's got 2 of them listed in the measurement area. Do you have the proof you need? It's not subjective so much, it's just factual compiling material. So are you convinced that the organization is complying with your policy provision? And I should have rephrased that. Is anybody not convinced? Hearing none, we can go on and move to 2.8.2 non-compliance communication.
Hi, all. Carly knows this, but I'm signing off.
Okay.
Thanks so much to all of you. See you soon.
Take care.
2.8.2 non-compliance communication. The executive director shall not allow the commission to be without a timely alert to any actual or anticipated non-compliance of material policies. So here you see how she's defined in the operational interpretation timely alert, material policies, and then she's got an extra paragraph in operational interpretation, and then her measurement plan. Does anybody have any clarifying questions for Carly? Hearing none, does anybody have any concerns about the reasonableness of the operational interpretation and the measurement plan for 2.8.2?
I guess the one question I'd have for Carly is that the way that you laid out the budget would tell me that you don't have any anticipation of any financial burdens that would cause us to be out of compliance.
Correct. And I used that only as an example of what non-compliance would look like. So if there was a lawsuit or something that was going to cause us to exceed our legislative appropriation, I would need to report that as soon as I am reasonably aware that it would happen. Because waiting for a scheduled monitoring period, like if I was aware of it next month, we wouldn't want to wait a whole nother year to talk about it. So again, that's just an example. And as Zach said, because I don't anticipate any of that and the budget was balanced, I haven't reported anything of that nature.
Which brings us down to the supporting data section or the evidence. There were no instances of actual or anticipated non-compliance with material policies during the period being monitored, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does anybody have any concerns about the data that was provided? Okay, moving on to 283. This is the first example where I believe more subjective discussion at the commission level is important. So I'll weave that into the measurement plan when we get a little further down. 283 provision states the executive director shall not allow the commission or board to be uninformed of non-compliance with governance process or executive director delegation policies, particularly in the case of commission behavior that is detrimental to its working relationship with the executive director. I'll give you a moment to read through or refresh your memories of the operational interpretation section and the measurement section, and then open it up for either clarifying questions or voicing concerns about reasonableness.
For the record, Commissioner Graves has joined the meeting.
All right, does anybody have any concerns about the operational interpretation and measurement plan reasonableness for 283? All right, I referenced before where I think this is a good example of a provision that would benefit from some subjective conversation. So if you were to mentally add a number 2 in the measurement section that said something to the, something like, in retrospect, were there incidences when Carly should have alerted the chair/members because we were not complying with our governance process and delegation policies? So this is the opportunity where you can reflect back as a governing body to say, how'd we do? Were there opportunities missed because we weren't informed and should have been informed that we weren't complying with our own governing policies? So I want to just give you space to think about that and have some conversation along those lines. And I'll read that again. Adding a number 2 to the measurement indicators. In retrospect, were there instances when Carly should have alerted chair or members because we were not complying with our governance process and delegation policies?
The only instance I can think of and was and we were told about it, was in the last monitoring report where she indicated she was out of compliance,
Mhm.
but we knew about that because it was presented to us.
Did she indicate she was out of compliance or the governing board was out, or governing commission was out of compliance?
If I recall correctly, it was the report itself was out of compliance.
Right. And so what we're doing here with this one is saying, are we getting what we need? And in this case, one of the things that you said in your policy is, we expect our executive director to call us out if we weren't living in our policies for ourselves. And we set that expectation out. And that's a really powerful policy to have in place because it really gives permission to your executive director to say to whatever the governing body is, hey, here are your policies for yourselves. Here's where there might be a situation where you've gone astray. My job is to alert you and then step back and let the governing body deal with it. This is the place where you can have that conversation about, did she call you out? Did she make that clear? Because you've tasked her with that. Okay.
I personally don't recall any conversations of that nature. And then I could say that Carly and I talk pretty frequently, and there hasn't been any instances of her that I can recall of anybody being out of compliance with our policies.
Commissioner Crawford, did you have a statement?
Well, my only question may come later on, and that is, when we do have to abstain from a vote, are we doing that in the correct manner? Should there be conversation prior to the meeting when everyone is present, as we get our materials to say, hey, I may have a potential conflict or abstain? And that's more of a procedure of how we do that versus, I don't think anyone has ever been called out for it.
So that's slightly different in nature, talking about your conflict of interest policies. I don't recall off the top of my head what we've got set up in this commission's policy framework for conflict of interest. But you'd need to go there. Help me connect the dots though. Carl, why are you thinking about conflict of interest in the context of whether or not Carly's alerted the commission or chair about a potential non-compliance on the commission's behavior for their related to usually their governance process quadrant? Help me understand.
No, again, this was a question I may have for later.
Oh,
But
okay.
as we're thinking about process of when we are alerted that either we stepped out of compliance one way or the other,
Oh,
are we doing this in the right way? Or is this something later on that could be seen as being out of compliance when we do that in front of the larger group versus having a heads up beforehand?
got it. And you're wondering perhaps if Carly has a role as executive director in spotting when a commission member should have stepped out?
Or
Because of a
should we be contacting Carly prior? As we get our materials, we may or may not know that there may be a potential
Yep.
conflict. Should we be alerting Carly prior to our full clemency review board meeting?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So what you might want to do with it, chairperson, is schedule time at an upcoming meeting, maybe one of these sorts of sessions, to double check everybody's understanding of what the conflict of interest policy says, and if there are some more procedural steps that need to be put in place in some other coordinating document, so everybody is clear about how they should be alerting, say, Carly, ahead of a meeting that there might be a potential conflict and that you'd need to step away from any voting. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Yeah. Yep.
Because in some cases, we had to step away, and it created a situation where we were either split on a vote. So we would have that knowledge maybe prior to making that decision.
Yep, okay. So we're on 283. Nope, I'm wrong. Where are we? Yep, 283, sorry. My computer locked up for a second. We're looking at the data. We're posing some questions. I put forward that there might be a self-reflection or a subjective question in there that we could build in the next time. Carly's been taking notes on some of that. Are there any other concerns that anybody would want to flag about the supporting data as it stands in the monitoring report right now?
Commissioner Roller, I believe you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I did have my hand raised, and this was around reflection. Has Carly, called us out? And I don't recall Carly calling us out, but we did have a robust conversation with you, Stacy, the last time we came together regarding our governance and our responsibility to kind of review the information.
That was a spot on. Yep,
Right,
exactly.
right. And we created this new process to address some of that, but I assume that those will be the type of things that Carly would be having conversations with us, either as a group or individually.
Yep. Yeah, that responsibility really goes two ways, doesn't it? You individually and collectively as a governing body, you need to be responsible for living within your policies, taking those policies seriously. And this provision is also saying or inviting Carly in to help you hold to those lines, right? And that's powerful. That's a powerful authority granted to any executive director, because it's hard to call out your boss. So I'm particularly fond of that provision. I think it's important. So I'm going to move us on to 284, as I'm not hearing of any concerns that would rise to the level of rejecting an interpretation as not reasonable or data not demonstrating compliance. So let's look at 284 now. This is another example where I think there's some subjective nature to this policy, which reads, the executive director shall not neglect to submit unbiased decision information required periodically by the commissioner board, or let either body be unaware of relevant trends. So take a moment to read through Carly's operational interpretation and her proposed measurement indicators, and then I'll ask if those are reasonable to you and suggest one more subjective measurement indicator for you to consider. Okay, does anybody have any clarifying questions? Hearing none, are there any concerns by members about the reasonableness of this interpretation and the proposed measurement plan? Hearing none, I'd like you to look at those measurement compliance indicators. You've got two here that Carly is suggesting. The director provides proof of distribution of the CRC's annual report to the legislature, and the director provides evidence of other instances of reporting unbiased information to the commission. What would happen to your conversation and your ability to assess compliance with this particular policy if you added in retrospect, when we were making decisions as identified in Carly's interpretation, did we have the trend information and data necessary to understand the larger context the CRC operates within? So really that question is just simply begging the question to the commission members, did we get what we needed in terms of trends, et cetera, trends information, et cetera? So if you had to answer that question now, did you get what you needed? Did you get unbiased decision information required periodically by you, or were you informed of relevant trends as you did your work over the course of the last, however long it's been since we've activated these policies? And I'm getting this little baby nod from Zach going, yeah, I think we did.
No, I think we did. I think that there were definite call outs along the way of, in prioritization, time sensitivity, those kind of things that we pivoted really quickly to adjust. We've made adjustments in how the meeting runs and just the type of, just to keep things moving along quicker.
Well, hold the thought. All we're talking about here is, did we get what we needed in terms of relevant trends, decision-making information? Boom.
We did.
Yep, bite-sized pieces. How about the rest of you? Did you get what you needed in terms of unbiased information when you were making decisions, information on relevant trends?
I think Commissioner Graves.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Sorry for my tardiness at court this morning. Yes, I would agree that we had all the information that we needed. Specifically, I remember conversations about checking our own biases on certain types of cases, when there are cases regarding sexual assaults. How are we voting on those as compared to cases that deal with loss of life? And so, having that unbiased, just the hard numbers of what they were made us, think about how we're making those decisions in those cases.
Yep. And the rest of you, did you get what you needed? Did you get what you needed in terms of trends information and unbiased decision-making information? Yeah. That's the sort of conversation that we're looking for. Do we need more of? What would that look like? Hey, Carly, how about this? How about that? It's that kind of conversation that's so powerful with this particular monitoring report. It's all about your relationship. All right. Does anybody have any concerns about the data that was provided by Carly for this particular provision? Hearing none, we're going to move on to the next one. We have to scroll down and down and down to 2.8.5, ancillary information.
I'd just like to make a note that when we do talk about the data, the content in the data provided is confidential information.
Well, thanks for that.
So if we do want to discuss the particulars of it, we would have to go into closed session.
Super, thank you. 2.8.5, ancillary information. The executive director shall not allow the commission and board to be unaware of any significant ancillary information it requires, including anticipated media coverage, threatened or pending lawsuits, and material internal and external changes. And then she goes on to define ancillary information being different from monitoring or decision preparation / education information. I'll give you a moment to read through the operational interpretation and her proposed measurement plan. Know that I've got a suggestion too here for subjective dialogue as part of the measurement plan. So go ahead and take a little bit of time. Does anybody have any clarifying questions? Hearing none, does anybody have any concerns about the reasonableness of the operational interpretation? Check it against those assessment questions on the slide on the screen. Hearing none, I'll call your attention to the measurement indicators. Carly shares one, the director shows proof of reporting ancillary information to the commission. And that's great. Like, show me the proof. But there still is this subjective nature of the provision itself. So I might suggest, members, that you add, or a second discussion question be added. In retrospect, were there instances where we felt inadequately informed related to anticipated media coverage, threatened or pending lawsuits, material internal or external changes? And then open up the conversation from there. So if that was indeed in place, what were your thoughts? In retrospect, were there instances where we felt inadequately informed related to anticipated media coverage, threatened or pending lawsuits, material internal and external changes?
This
I
is
could say
Commissioner
that.
Graves. I have a question, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask now. But the question I have is why the interpretation for media coverage does not include cases that we're going to hear, because that level of media coverage could also be something we want to know about.
That's a good question. So what I was trying to provide a balance. So we've been getting more and more media requests. A lot of times it's for data, or, for example, there was a report of someone who, recently, this happened at the board meeting, that they were detained by ICE the day after their pardon was granted. So I was trying to find a way of figuring out how to provide information that would be potentially detrimental to the CRC versus every instance of media coverage. Because I was just thinking about the last few weeks, there's just been a lot of reporters reaching out, and I don't always, I ask them what their story is about, but I don't always know exactly what they are reporting on, and they're usually asking for background data. But I'm open to adjusting what I provide.
No, I like, that's a fair interpretation. The first media that will be detrimental to the work that we are doing, I think that's appropriate, so that we're not inundated with, if you're getting a lot of those type of media data inquiries.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge that some of them may be after the fact, because I won't always know ahead of time, but part of this was I want to keep it on my radar to make sure that I share those, because I have all the Google alerts set, but you all don't have to.
Additional thoughts? Were there instances where we felt inadequately informed related to anticipated media coverage, threatened or pending lawsuits, material internal or external changes? We're not trying to do gotcha here, by the way. We're simply starting the conversation and reflecting together over the course of the last year, because that may inform how you might need to tweak your policy language. And it certainly gives more understanding for Carly about the mindset of that board, so she can be more responsive to where your concerns are.
And one thing I'll note is that because this report only goes from September 10th,
Not much.
you
data
may
there.
be able to think of previous things. For example, in the first 6 months of the CRC that I alerted you to, those are not included just because of the time period.
Yeah.
And that, I was going to allude to that too.
Mhm.
There was stuff previous to this, what this report captured, and I felt like we've had adequate notice of knowing when a media was going to be present, when they were going to run a story about us, other things when we first started. So I've not really felt like I've been blindsided by anything.
Right.
And I guess that would be the question for the commission is there anything that's come up and since we've been, well, we're only focusing on this day period, but at the same point in time, I felt like we've had adequate information all the way along.
All right, I'm gonna keep us moving on. I'm gonna is there one?
Commissioner Crawford unmuted.
No, why can I not see those?
I can-
Sorry.
If
Well, I
everyone's
just
okay
had
with
a-
it, I can stop sharing the questions so then we can see a bigger.
Members, do you have those questions kind of imprinted in your brains well enough that we can take that off the screen?
More or less.
Or is it more or less?
Yes.
Take a screenshot, do whatever. Yep. Okay, go, was it Carl? Did you have a?
Yeah, briefly,
question?
I mean, this kind of puts an undue pressure on Carly. How would you know if media was to show up? And what is the recourse? Let's just say they do show up, right? I guess my question is, to the best of your ability, you're able to let us know, but would we always know?
Right. And she can unpack that in her interpretation, that reality that you were just talking about. To the best of my ability, if I know something ahead of time, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's also a matter of how is she going to alert you? Is she going to have maybe an email with a banner alert that goes out to members saying, hey, heads up, something that's going to capture your attention right away, and reference she's sharing this information in compliance with 286. So you instantly know, okay, this is regarding this particular policy. Getting those sorts of systems in place takes time, and training your brains to be able to spot something takes time too.
Right, because
All right,
our meetings are open and we don't have
Exactly.
the ability to not allow
Right. Yep.
media in.
So she has to take that into consideration in her reasonable operational interpretation.
Which I appreciate you calling that out, because I think in the next time I do this report, I might add something about media I have reasonable knowledge of, similar to my interpretation related to lawsuits. A threatened lawsuit will only be reported if the director reasonably believes the threatened suit will be filed, because I can anticipate if there is some big, well, let's just say the government, people threaten to sue the government all the time. Some are more reasonable threats than others, and I don't know that the commission needs to know about every single time.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving on. Just a point of privilege. I might not be able to drink anybody under the table, but I can sit and deal with monitoring reports like nobody's business. So just for those of you that are starting to get antsy, we just have 3 provisions left and then we're done. So hang in there with us, okay? We're at 286, information clarity. This provision within communication of the board, support to the board, says the executive director shall not present information in an untimely and unnecessary, complex or lengthy form, or without differentiating amongst the 3 types of information: monitoring, which is what we're dealing in now; decision preparation, like providing information unbiased, et cetera, and education. How do you get smarter at, say, governance? And ancillary that you defined earlier, okay? She provides an operational interpretation and a measurement plan, as I've done every time. Take a few moments to collect your thoughts, refresh your memory, and then I'll ask if there are any clarifying questions and for the reasonableness of this interpretation. And in this case, she does. This is one where number 2 is a subjective question. This is one that she built it right in for you, okay? Any clarifying questions for Carly on the operational interpretation, or OI? and the measurement plan? Hearing none, are there any concerns about the reasonableness of the OI and the measurement plan for 286? Hearing none, look at the measurement data for number 1. The director provides proof of information sent in a timely fashion. You need to scroll down for a couple pages and look through that. I'll give you a moment to do that. Refresh your memories. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about data provided for number 1 in the measurement plan? So you're frantically scrolling down through those next couple of pages, looking at the proof. Hearing none, let's move back up to the discussion embedded in the second compliance indicator. The commission, that's all of you, reports that information provided was not unnecessarily complex or lengthy. So think back over the last however many months since this has gone live. What is it, 5? Yep. When you were getting information as defined up above, was it hitting the mark, or were you completely overwhelmed with the complexity and the length?
This is Commissioner Graves. I would say it was hitting the mark. No one responded for clarification or that they needed further understanding on anything. It seems succinct and timely. I know there were some times where we would have hearings and like there would be new material that would come in and she would get that to us right away. And so, yeah, I think she has been in compliance with us.
So I'm seeing nonverbals here that many are in agreement. Does anybody have any concerns that they'd want to lift up? Be mindful that this is the time when you can put those concerns on the table and have discussion about what might need to be tweaked in the system to make it work for you better moving forward. So it sounds like Carly's hitting the mark on that one. Excellent. We'll move on then to 288. I'm going. Where is it? There it is. Yep. 287. Adequate information. The last one was complexity, lengthiness, and this is adequate. So 287 policy provision says the executive director shall not create a decision environment in which the commission and board operates without access to staff and external points of view, issues, and options as is reasonable for fully informed decisions. She provides you with an operational interpretation and a measurement plan. This is another example where I would add another subjective conversation. We'll do it just like we did before. Take some time. Assess the reasonableness of what's here in the OI and the measurement plan. Okay, any clarifying questions? Does anybody have any concerns about the reasonableness of the operational interpretation, the OI, and the measurements as provided by Carly? Not the data, we're just looking at the measurements. Hearing none, let's take care of the data provided for the stated 1 and 2. And then I'll bring you back and add a possible number 3 where we can get at the subjective nature of this. So scrolling down through the data, for 1, the director can show that commissioners have access to staff contact data. And 2, The director can show instances of sharing external points of view, issues, and options. So take a moment or two to scroll through that information. All right, anybody have concerns about whether the data provided for those two compliance indicators does not hit the mark? Was the proof not there? In other words, if you want to think in the negative. Okay, let's check in on your gut now. If we added a number 3 to the compliance indicator plan that said, in retrospect, when making decisions, did we have adequate access to staff and external points of view? How would you answer that? Thinking over the last 5 months. I'll read it again. In retrospect, when making decisions, did we have adequate access to staff and external points of view? What's your gut saying? I'm getting very gentle head nodding, some pondering. Commissioner Burt in just a moment is going to say something really profound.
No, I would say yes, we have.
Mhm.
We were able to talk to the head of the DLC if we had questions about processes, or
Yep.
if there was an ability to sort of guide our decision making with their assistance to, for instance, I think in the last 5 months, we had the gentleman who wanted to go to barber school before he got out, even though we were in a position to release him sort of immediately. He said, no, I'd rather, he wanted to kind of go through the step down process to get himself better prepared to be more successful. And I think that's part of that outside points of view or expertise that we've gotten into this rhythm of utilizing.
Yep.
Besides the other members of the commission who know more about some of these things.
Yep.
So that I think, yes, we have been utilizing that, and it's just thinking about it in a much more sort of open way.
Right. Yep. How about the rest of you? Were you getting what you needed in terms of adequate access to staff and external points of view? Anybody have anything to add? Okay. All right, then ta-da, we have reached the last provision, 2.8.8. Let's go down there.
That's not true. There's a 2.892.
Dang it, is there a 2.892?
There is.
Oh,
This one was
more
A
goodies.
very long policy.
Okay, well, let's go. 288, communication methods. The executive director shall not allow the commission or board to operate without adequate administrative support or a workable mechanism for official communications and information access. I can tell you, this is usually the spot where people go, I hate SharePoint, or I can't get into this, or whatever it is. So that's the, yep, there we go. So take a moment, look at the operational interpretation and the measurement plan. Yeah, I got an added one to stimulate the discussion that I'd like to see on your measurement plans for a number 3. So take a moment, collect your thoughts. And are there any clarifying questions for the operational interpretation, the OI, and the measurements as listed? Clarifying questions? Nope. Does it strike you as reasonable? Is this a reasonable interpretation of your policy?
This is
With those
Commissioner
measures.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, I do think it's reasonable. I think we've had conversations about issues with communication, with having multiple emails. And
Mhm.
I do feel like the staff has worked with us, at least for me, with sending, calendar invites even to other email addresses, which is, I really appreciate.
Yep.
So I would say, yes, I think it's reasonable.
Good. And I'm seeing other heads nodding. I'm checking in with Zach. Okay. So what I would add to this really is to just get at precisely what you were doing, Carly. Were our information access and administrative supports adequate? It's begging the question. You can get some of the proof stuff that Carly can provide, but she can't answer for you. So did we have what we needed? That's subjective. So did you have what you needed? Yep, there you go. So if we build that into your indicators, then we're 3/4 of the way there. And that brings us down to the one that I was missing, 289, communication to the whole commission. I think it's because I didn't have a subjective question here. The executive director shall not work with individual commission members rather than the whole commission on official business, except when fulfilling responsible individual requests for information or responding to officers or committees duly charged by the commission. Just a quick OI there for you and a measurement plan. Take a moment to read it. Any clarifying questions? Does anybody have any concerns about the reasonableness of this operational interpretation and measurement plan? Looking at the data, straight up data, one sentence long. Did the data demonstrate compliance? Some of these are really hard for Carly to provide the proof. Like, how do I prove that something didn't happen? That's challenging for a lot of the executive limitations.
I'd just say, maybe I'm misinterpreting this, or maybe I'm not, but all our subcommittees did not have a quorum, so there was, but she was directed to sit in on those, like the rules committee, the screening committee, and then brought that information came back to the commission as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we've ever been in a spot where there's been a quorum and decisions being made outside of a public entity. And obviously her report is that none of us have felt like that's happened either. So, I mean, I think, and I know that when she sends stuff to us, like our invites to the share drive or the packets are here or we're having a meeting, it's always to everybody. So I think that she's been in very good compliance with this.
All right. So we go full circle then back up to the global policy at the very end of this report. Reminder that global policy, the executive director shall not cause or allow the commission or board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. Carly submitting that in terms of her interpretation, that if she's in compliance with all of those provisions that the board has already spelled out, then she's in compliance with this policy. So if you look down in the evidence section, compliant, that's her opinion of this, that she's in compliance. But the board would also have to add its own thinking in because of the subjective nature of what we were talking about in so many of these. Right? So now's the point where I'd ask you, I should just turn it back over to you to ask for a motion to accept this.
So we'll do the three types of motions that we could have set in front of us essentially is to accept the report 2.8 communications and support to the commission board as reasonable interpretation of our policy and the data provided demonstrates compliance. Motion to accept this report, 2.8 communication and support to the commission and board. And by the way, these are covering time periods of September 10th, 2025 to January 22nd, 2026. As a reasonable interpretation of our policy with the following minor concerns, the data provided demonstrates compliance with the existing material. The commission does not require a new report be submitted before its next schedule to be reviewed, which would be next year, or a motion to accept this report as out of compliance as submitted by the executive director and accept a plan of compliance as an interim report. To me, this one we didn't have any concerns, and I believe we mostly agreed that, or really agreed that this report is in compliance. So I think the first motion would probably be the most appropriate. So I can offer that up again as a motion to accept this report, 2.8 communication and support to the commission and board for time period September 10th, 2025 to January 22nd, 2026 as a reasonable interpretation of our policy and that the data provided demonstrates compliance. Is there anybody that would like to move that motion?
Move Commissioner Roller.
Is there a second?
I'll second Commissioner Bad Harple.
Executive Director Stark, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Burt's hand was up for a second. Do you have any discussion? No. Okay. I will call the roll. Commissioner Roller.
Yes.
Commissioner Burt.
Yes.
Commissioner Crawford.
Yes.
Commissioner Bad Hartbull.
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington.
Yes.
Commissioner Graves.
Yes.
Commissioner Messerich.
Yes.
Commissioner Lindstrom.
Yes, 8-0.
So to wrap both of these up, then the final thing you would do is reflect back on each one of these policies to say, or ask yourselves, is there anything in the language of our policies, either 2.4 or 2.8, that you would want to adjust? You need to make changes to your language. And I know you're tired. This was a long haul.
I will say in the interim that appreciate full participation today from everybody on the commission. We had all 9 members present at one point in time or another, so really glad to see that for the governance piece.
Yeah. So I'm not hearing any changes suggested in policy. I would suggest in the future, and I think I mentioned this before, pulling up the policy, just the policy, so you can see it as a whole, makes it kind of easier to look at this. So I'd encourage you to do that in some way, shape, or form, and give that due diligence. And now you've experienced what it's like to, last month, you did the survey and automated the process. You decided that time you wanted to do the long way and talk through each one. And you see the impact on what it means in terms of time to set aside. It'll go faster in the future, but it still takes more time to do this. Either way is fine. Either way is just fine. You've experienced both now. And with that, I bet you're so ready for me to just shush up and go away.
We really appreciate you, Stacy. Thanks for
Always happy
spending
to help.
time with us and helping
Happy
guide
to
us
help.
down this path.
Yeah. All righty. You'll get there.
I believe item 3 on the agenda is executive director updates.
It is, and I will try to make this short. First, I want to acknowledge that we have Ben Wells with us today. He is not completely on camera, but he is our new paralegal. We are very excited to now have a team of 6 and Gretchen. our contractor for victim services, who is part of the team. With that, our schedule for the first half of the year is locked in as far as we have a meeting every month. And in the second half of the year, we also have a meeting every month. I have only provided which ones are governance versus hearings for the first half of the year. Because we're trying to figure out if with this added capacity, we can have more hearings in the second half of the year. So right now we're going to have hearings March, April, and May. And we're also planning August, September, October for hearings in the second half of the year, and the rest will be governance and training. But again, we're hoping to be able to get in a few more of those hearing days. I think I've heard both from the public and the commission a desire to hear more cases, especially with everything going on. So as Ben is onboarded, we will see how that capacity increase will help us to potentially prepare more summaries. Another thing we've talked about in the past is having some kind of mini summary for commutations so that the screening committee and then the full committee can review those and see if the commission wants to use its ability to deny commutations without a hearing to sort of work through some of the commutations we haven't been able to hear and haven't been higher priority. So we will have further conversations about that. And then legislative session is starting soon. We haven't talked about a lot of changes as a commission because we as staff have been doing a lot of research. I have 2 footnotes to change and then this comparative research that Zia wrote, or comparative research report talking about practices throughout the country related to clemency. That will be ready and I can send that out. I have some legislative proposals that I am getting to the Board of Pardons so that they can give me a sense of whether they support them or not and what to seek changes on. Once I get that first review by the board, I'm going to send those proposals to all of you. One of them I know that we want to seek this year is allowing victims to provide confidential victim feedback in writing, whether or not they have a protective order. We have a lot of people who come to the hearing and ask for a closed hearing just because they have fear of co-defendants or other ramifications related to their testimony. And what I've heard both from advocates for applicants and for victims is that having that be in writing and confidential is reasonable in this situation. So we're considering that change. We would also like to bring up the bill that we tried last year where waivers and rehearing requests can be considered by the board outside of an open meeting because you all review them on paper, then they go to the board and we have to wait until there's a meeting for them to make a final decision. I don't know if that was the intent of the original legislation, and it also doesn't impact the transparency of the final decision. So those are 2 somewhat minor changes. They're impactful, but they're not complete overhauls. The other ones will be related to expedited processes to see if we can make some changes in the legislation to help with that, or make some changes about rulemaking authority to make it less administratively burdensome, potentially asking for an expedited rulemaking process. And so those are some of the things I'm looking into, and you will receive more information about that. But I wanted to make sure that I ran it by the Board of Pardons first, since they also need to agree on those proposals. So I recognize that it is very close to the beginning of session starting. Any legislation this year will be a big lift. But as staff, we've talked about how we should really try what we can with legislation. And then when we see how the session goes, dive into rulemaking at that point. Because we've talked about rulemaking since the beginning, but it is an extremely burdensome process and we just have not had capacity. So I'm looking into whether there are contractors that can help guide through that process. And also, I learned that we need a legislative change in order to do any kind of review with sub-panels. So that can't just be rulemaking. So I will get you more information when I have it. We may be making a small supplemental budget request, but really what we need is ongoing funding next biennium. So there will be more conversations about how you all can help with advocacy to both the board members and the legislature on a potential operating increase. That is, oh, you will be receiving the annual legislative report. It is due on February 15th. So I anticipate you will get it right around that time, as will the legislature. That is all I have for executive director updates. And if you don't mind, so the next is other business. I'm going to add this onto our agenda, our ongoing agenda, so that there is always a space for commissioners to bring up anything that they would like to talk about. If you tell me ahead of time, like during the hearings, I would appreciate that just for preparation and to make sure if there's anything I need available, I have it. But also, it's just an open chance for you all to bring things up.
Does anybody have any business they'd like to bring to the table today? Hearing none, I'd just like to thank everybody for participation today. It's great seeing everybody. We'll be back here in March for hearings. I want to thank Stacy for helping guide us along and thank the staff for preparing the meeting today. With that said, is there a motion to adjourn?
So you can adjourn without a motion. And if we do a motion, we have to do a roll call vote.
Okay, well, I will if nobody else has anything to say, I will say that we are adjourned for the day. We'll see you next month. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.